Imagine this. You're walking down a crowded street, your thoughts peaceful, your steps light. Then, out of nowhere, someone says something that cuts through you like glass. Maybe it's a stranger mocking your appearance. Maybe it's a colleague's subtle dig at your competence. Maybe it's someone you love, saying words you can't forget. Your chest tightens, your jaw clenches. You replay the words over and over in your mind, not because they're true, but because they hurt. But pause for a moment. Why do they hurt? The sound of an insult is just vibration in the air, words, fleeting, temporary, yet somehow they strike deeper than blades. A sound leaves a scar, an opinion shakes our peace. And here lies the paradox. No one can physically place pain inside you, yet you feel it as though they did. The power of an insult doesn't come from the tongue that utters it, but from the mind that receives it. So the real question isn't, how do I stop people from insulting me? It's, why do I give their words the power to define me? Because if someone calls you worthless and you feel wounded, isn't that wound proof that part of you believed them? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed." A simple idea, but one that threatens the very foundation of human emotion. Can peace truly exist in a world where offense is constant? Can a person become untouchable, not because they are unfeeling, but because they have mastered the inner alchemy of perception? Modern culture glorifies emotional reaction. We applaud clapping back, standing up for yourself, matching energy. Yet the Stoics saw something more profound, that silence in the face of insult is not weakness, it's sovereignty. To remain unmoved is not to lack emotion, it is to own it completely. But that raises an uncomfortable question. If someone insults you and you don't respond, have you won or have you surrendered? Society tells you that defending your ego is strength. Stoicism suggests the opposite, that needing to defend it means you've already lost. And so you stand at a strange crossroads between instinct and philosophy, between the part of you that burns for justice and the part that whispers, you don't need to prove yourself. What if the true defense against insult isn't retaliation, but realization? What if every word that tries to diminish you is merely an invitation to see how deeply you depend on the approval of others? Because when you no longer seek validation, insults lose their weapon. They become echoes, meaningless, passing, powerless. The question is, can you reach that state? Can you face cruelty without letting it shape you? That's where the real battle begins, not outside, but within. Every insult that wounds you isn't truly about the words, it's about the part of you that wants to be seen. Human beings are social creatures, but more than that, we are meaning-seeking ones. Deep within, we crave acknowledgement, validation, and belonging. When someone insults you, they aren't just rejecting your ideas, they're threatening your existence within the social order. That's why the sting feels existential, because psychologically, it is. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists." When we resist the discomfort of insult, we give it permanence. We obsess, replaying the moment in our minds, trying to rewrite reality. We want control, but the harder we grasp it, the more we feed the very wound we wish to heal. This is the trap of the ego, the fragile image of self that lives in the minds of others. We build it carefully, polish it daily, and then spend our lives defending it from even the faintest attack. Yet the Stoics, men who faced exile, betrayal, and even death, dared to ask, what if this image isn't real at all? Epictetus taught that if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. He meant that insults only stick when they find something sticky within us, some unresolved insecurity or hidden need for validation. The insult is just the spark, the fire is already inside. This is where philosophy becomes psychological. Because beneath every emotional wound lies an assumption that our worth depends on how others see us. It's an illusion so deep, we mistake it for truth. The entire machinery of society runs on it. Social media, hierarchy, competition, even love. Nietzsche called this the slave morality, the quiet surrender of power to external judgment. We let others define our value, and then we call it self-esteem. But self-esteem, built on reflection, is a mirror, not a core. And mirrors break easily. That's why insults destabilize us. They expose the cracks in the image we've created. They force us to confront the uncomfortable fact that much of our confidence isn't self-born, it's borrowed. And so we lash out, we defend, we set the record straight. But each time we do, we're reinforcing the same dependency we wish to escape. And Machiavelli might have said it best, "He who seeks to be loved must prepare to be manipulated." Insults, like flattery, are both tools of control, opposite sides of the same coin. They reveal who still needs approval to feel whole. And this is the hidden problem. It's not the insult that enslaves you. It's the belief that you can't exist without being understood. Until that illusion breaks, every careless word will have power over you.
Imagine carrying an invisible string, one end tied around your heart, the other dangling freely in the hands of anyone who chooses to pull it. That's what it means to depend on the opinions of others. Every insult, every judgment, every smirk becomes a small tug. And before long, your emotions no longer belong to you. This is how most people live, not by choice, but by conditioning. Society trains us to outsource our worth. From childhood, we're rewarded for compliance, praised for likability, and punished for defiance. Slowly, we begin to associate peace with approval. We start confusing acceptance with safety. But what happens when the applause stops? When the validation fades? When someone finally calls you a name you can't ignore? The ego panics because it realizes it has no ground of its own. And that's when the descent begins. You start internalizing every insult. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am difficult or cold or not enough. A simple jab from someone you barely know becomes a narrative that runs your life. That's how subtle the corruption of self-esteem can be. Modern psychology calls this emotional outsourcing, when your sense of worth is built entirely on external signals. It's not just emotionally exhausting, it's spiritually devastating. Because the more power you give to others' words, the less of yourself remains untouched. You begin to censor your truth before speaking, anticipate mockery before expressing, and apologize for existing before offending. You become a self-monitoring machine, efficient, polite, and terrified. And what's worse, you start confusing this paralysis for maturity. You tell yourself you're being professional or stoic, but in reality, you've confused suppression with strength. The Stoics never taught emotional denial. They taught detachment through understanding. They knew that the moment you fear being misunderstood, you've surrendered control of your peace. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If anyone can show me my thought or action is mistaken, I shall gladly change it," he wasn't displaying humility. He was demonstrating sovereignty. His sense of self was so rooted in truth that correction didn't wound him, it enlightened him. Contrast that with the modern mind, addicted to being right, desperate to be liked, enslaved by perception. The more technologically connected we become, the more psychologically fragile we grow. Every comment section is a battlefield of egos too scared to bleed. And so the unseen consequence of being ruled by insult isn't just emotional, it's existential. You lose touch with who you are when no one's watching. Your inner life becomes a PR campaign. The world calls this success. The Stoics called it bondage. Rebellion doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's silent. Sometimes it looks like sitting still while the world provokes you and choosing not to flinch. That's the Stoic rebellion. Not defiance born from rage, but from reason. Not, I don't care, but I understand why I don't need to. Imagine this. Someone mocks you in public, a subtle jab wrapped in humor. The room laughs. For a moment, your instinct screams to defend yourself, to prove you're not weak. But then something inside you pauses. You see the insult not as an attack, but as a mirror, reflecting their insecurity, not your inadequacy. That's the moment of power most people never reach. Because power isn't reacting. Power is remaining still while your emotions beg you to move. Seneca once wrote, "He who is insulted only feels insulted if he believes it." In other words, no one can wound you without your consent. Insults don't enter the mind through sound, they enter through agreement. The Stoic understands this deeply. They see that every insult is just an opinion, a projection wrapped in language. And opinions, by nature, are powerless unless you decide otherwise. So how do you break free from the tyranny of offense? You begin by questioning every emotional impulse. Before reacting, ask yourself, is this about truth or my ego demanding attention? Most people defend themselves not because they've been wronged, but because they can't bear the thought of being unseen. The ego doesn't crave justice, it craves acknowledgement. And the moment you stop feeding that hunger, you start becoming untouchable. This is the paradox of Stoic rebellion. It's not about suppressing emotion, but mastering its direction. Anger becomes insight. Pain becomes perspective. Insult becomes information. When someone calls you a fool and you know you are not, the statement becomes irrelevant. When someone calls you arrogant and you realize it's partly true, you learn. Either way, you win. That's the Stoic's quiet triumph. Every insult becomes a teacher. Every provocation a test. Every wound a mirror.
But breaking free isn't just mental, it's spiritual. It's realizing that your worth can't be negotiated by external voices. It's remembering that self-control isn't suppression, it's sovereignty. To rebel against insult is to reclaim authorship over your perception. To say your words can enter my ears, but not my mind. When you master that, something shifts. Insults no longer feel personal because you've stopped personalizing everything. You no longer need to prove who you are. You know who you are. And that, in a world built on reaction, is the most radical act of all. There comes a moment, often after years of defending yourself, when you finally understand you were never fighting the insult. You were fighting the need to be seen as something more than human. That's the quiet realization that Stoicism leads you toward. Freedom isn't found in being untouchable. It's found in no longer needing protection. You see, most people spend their lives trying to manage perception, sculpting an image, defending their name, polishing their bride. But the Stoic learns that the more you chase reputation, the more fragile you become. Because every opinion, every whisper, every careless remark now holds power over you. The greatest trap of all is not hatred, it's dependence. Dependence on approval, dependence on validation, dependence on being understood. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't be." It sounds deceptively simple, but in that single line lies a lifetime of liberation. Because harm is not what happens to you. Harm is what you allow to define you. Every insult, every rejection, every misunderstanding, it only lives as long as you keep it alive in thought. And the Stoics' ultimate victory is this: They stop resurrecting their wounds through memory. Think about it. How many sleepless nights have you spent replaying words that no longer exist? How many moments of peace have you sacrificed to ghosts of conversations that were never worth your energy? The truth is, the world will always misunderstand you. But misunderstanding doesn't diminish truth. It only exposes how few can see it. When you stop trying to correct every misjudgment, you begin to feel something deeper than confidence. Tranquility. Not the calm of indifference, but the calm of clarity. You finally realize that insult cannot survive where there is no ego to feed it. And that's the final paradox. Invulnerability doesn't come from armor, it comes from transparency. From being so deeply grounded in who you are that there's nothing left to defend. You become like water, soft enough to yield but strong enough to wear down stone. You no longer meet insult with resistance, you meet it with understanding. You don't suppress emotion, you observe it until it dissolves in awareness. This is the Stoic's secret. True strength is not the absence of reaction, it's the mastery of meaning. Because once you understand that every insult is simply noise, an echo of another's internal chaos, you stop trying to fight echoes. You start living in stillness. You start walking through life unshaken. And the world, sensing something it cannot provoke, begins to respect what it cannot move. That's the highest form of defense. Not silence born from fear, but peace born from power. Because when your self-worth no longer depends on anyone else's voice, every insult becomes what it always was, a sound. And you, the space it passes through.